Letters to the resilient ones, to the bold ones, to the courageous ones, to the dependable ones, to the heavily burdened ones. Letters to the Strong Ones podcast. Hey, and blessings, everyone. It's your girl, Steph Jones, also known as Zalet Kalandra, here with another episode of Letters to the Strong One podcast, where we talk about what it means to be a strong one, the struggles we go through, the weight on our shoulders, the silence, the isolation, all the things that happen that we don't really talk about, the taboo things that everyone experiences, but we don't really share about. And so I have the privilege and the honor of having an amazing guest with me tonight so we can talk about what it looks like to be a strong one in personal life, professional life, and all of that. So I have with me Laura Smothers-Chu. She's the CEO and founder of Joy in Dementia. Here, she teaches long-distance caregivers positive and practical steps to help navigate their parents' dementia. As a long-distance daughter for several years, she understands firsthand the struggles we face when caregiving for our parents is from afar. Laura is also certified to advise elders. We need that, okay? She's a certified dementia practitioner, and she's worked in healthcare for over 10 years. With a unique perspective to caregiving, Laura is an engaging speaker in the dementia field. She's committed to empowering long-distance caregivers one positive and practical step at a time so that they care for their parents and stop putting their dreams on hold. Yes, to all of that. Let me finish that. And stop putting their dreams on hold. Let's bring up Laura. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me. It's so great to be here.
Absolutely. Look, that last part just resonated. You know, strong ones, we are always the ones to put our dreams on hold. We stop everything. We put everyone before ourselves. So I wanted to really reemphasize that. Like, we don't have to put our dreams on hold because we have the right tools. Thank you so much for being here, Laura.
Thank you. I actually just added that part to my mission, and I'm so glad it resonates well with you because it's so true. I mean, you and I were talking right before this podcast. Like, while I was long distance caregiving for my dad with dementia, I was also going through the fertility journey as well for more than 5 years, and doing all the science things that you could possibly do to get a baby.
Yeah.
And so that was quite stressful, as well as having, a full-time job. So yeah, we do all the things as the strong ones, yeah.
Yeah. We do all the things and then some. So I read your bio, but please, in your own words and who you are, just let the listeners know who you are, and then we'll get into your strong story.
Sure. So my name is Laura, as Steph said, and I am an only child. I have been pretty independent, I think. Like, from when I was young, I was talking to my mom, because now I luckily have a toddler who's almost 2 years and 6 months old. So yay, finally. And that was definitely, that may not have been our chapter. So I'm so glad, so grateful that I was able to put together a care team of professionals, do my own research, advocate for my own healthcare, because I had to do that for fertility as well as my dad's dementia. So luckily, I guess I had a little bit of experience in that, but it's so sad that we have to do that. But yeah, so I was talking to my mom the other day, and she said, you always were such a good kid, right? And I'm wondering if that was your experience too, Steph. It was like, you were such a good kid, right? But then with that, it's like, yeah, because we knew how to people please, right? Like, we knew how to hold the burden, right? And honestly, I do this now too, like, married to my husband. Like, if I'm really upset and I'm grieving, like, I'm by myself, like, in the bathroom, like, on the bathroom floor crying. You know what I mean? Like, it has to be like in my own little cozy corner, and I help myself through, or with my cat, or my dog, right?
Yes, it's the truth. And that's why I thought it was important to bring this podcast to light, because so many of us experience this, when we're grieving, when we're going through something, when we're dealing with tough feelings based on our childhood. Now we kind of isolate from our significant others. We kind of push everyone aside. We don't even really let our friends know until we've gone through it. And I mean, that's learned behavior. And
Yes.
and I and I agree, about, oh, you're such a good child. You didn't cause me any problems. You didn't cause me any issues. It's like I wanted to, but either my siblings were taking up all the space, or you couldn't emotionally handle it. Like I wanted to make a little noise. I wanted to get a little attention, but you learn to be quiet. You learn to subdue your own emotions so that you don't cause a ruckus because you see all the chaos going on. So I resonate very deeply with that.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Absolutely. And so that was kind of, my childhood. And I had a little bit of older parents compared to my peers.
Okay.
But I was, I think as an only child, I was able to make friends with all different ages. And I essentially like created my own families, in different times in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's see, I moved to California when I graduated from college because I did not know what I wanted to do with my psychology degree. I didn't want to do all the
Okay.
things you were supposed to do in the boxes,
Sure.
Um, and so I worked at a healthcare nonprofit, found out I really wanted to be in healthcare. It was a random nonprofit. It was coordinating organ and tissue donation, and I was the front desk person. So I was taking
Oh,
calls
wow.
on a
Mm-hmm.
regular basis about people dying, which is
Yeah.
like, really stressful.
Yes.
But it was a rewarding work, and I really liked being in the nonprofit field. And
Mm-hmm.
so I went to get my master's degree after a few years, nonprofit management, best program. I got my degree, my master's, and then I moved to DC, found out that apparently nonprofits don't make much money when you're actually working directly with the people that you want to work with. You have to kind of work
Yeah.
in like an association silo away from the people that you really want to help in order to make a living
Yeah.
wage. And so while that was happening and I was, trying to make my own path as, a 20 something, late 20 something year old, I was still single at the time. My dad was, and I had suspected some things, and I actually got this put in motion. My
Mm-hmm.
dad was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, which can,
Mm-hmm.
in some cases, lead to dementia, which in our case it
Yes.
did.
Yeah.
And so, so I live 3.5 hours away from my parents.
Mm.
My mom was not quite ready to accept the diagnosis. And so, essentially, my dad had a conversation with me, before he was diagnosed, and was just like, I can't balance my checkbook anymore.
Oh.
And so, if you're a long distance caregiver, you hear something and you're like, hmm, that's strange,
Yes.
and then you kind
Yes.
of like, there's like a little like compartment in your brain where you're like taking notes of like the strange things that you notice about your parent. That was not the case for like his whole life because he taught me
Yeah.
math. He was amazing at math, right?
Correct.
And so I was just like, something is wrong. Something is wrong. And so we saw a neuropsychologist, we got that diagnosis. And I basically had to do, all the research by myself behind the scenes. And luckily, I was in the healthcare field, so I knew who to talk to. I knew, what classes to take, where to go.
Yeah.
But, for like the average Joanna or Joe, right? It's like,
You wouldn't.
no idea, right? And it's funny because like that, before I realized I had to use my network, I went to the prominent dementia websites, and it really felt, this was more than 10 years. It was like more than, yeah, I would say like more than 8 years ago, even maybe even more than 10 years ago. And they basically said, like, if you live long distance, stay out of it. Don't be a burden to like the caregiver
Oh.
that lives. Yeah, I mean, that was the, between the lines type thing that it was saying. But it was like,
Oh.
oh, you could do wonderful things like send money to, the caregivers and the person with dementia. And I'm like, I'm 28. So, and I'm
Correct.
barely making a living in a nonprofit in the middle of DC. Like, that's not going to happen. Right. And then the other one was, like run errands for them. And I was like, how am I going to do that? Right. And it just like, it blew my mind, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like, they're like, I'm sure that I'm not the only one, but there are no resources on this. And even so, I still talk to my clients and they're like, yeah, there really isn't anything out there for,
There's nothing.
how long distance caregivers can support. And, and Steph, you and I were talking about this, before the podcast, and it was just like, it just blows my mind. Like I can't fathom how the healthcare industry I'm in America, but I've worked with clients outside of America, and it's the
Yeah.
same there too. It's like it's universal that the healthcare industry just wants to throw everything at the primary caregiver. In my case, it was my
Yeah.
mom that lived with my dad, and she was barely surviving. And that's what I hear universally, even from primary caregivers. Like they are barely surviving, let alone trying to think about like long-term, who's my power of attorney, who's my person's power of attorney and all of this stuff, right? It's like there's just no room in your brain, like emotionally, physically, spiritually, to hold all of that.
Right.
And so what I talk about is that, we get a bad rap as long distance caregivers, that like, oh, well, you don't want to move back, in my case, with your parents and, help them out and all that stuff. And like what I find in working with, like, in my case and working with clients, it's like, yeah, but you don't know what the dynamic is like. You know what I mean? Like, you
Exactly.
know what I mean?
You
And
get
you and I just
generalized
talking about being the strong ones, right? Like we were the strong ones as children. Like, how are we
as
going to live
children.
our own lives and not put our dreams on hold if we're living with them, right? And so, but what I've discovered is that it could actually be an advantage to being a long distance caregiver, and we shouldn't get a bad rap because we can, in my case, um, I was able to see from a bird's eye perspective what my mom was
Mm,
trying to like cut through
mm,
in the forest, because she's got like tunnel vision because of the role that she's in, right? Um,
yeah.
and so like, I can see the oasis, I can see the clearing that's coming up because I'm up here, right? And they're
Right.
here. And
That's
that's
right.
just because of not only the geographical, I guess distance, but also the emotional distance that's possible, right? Which could also
Yeah.
be a benefit in my case, right? And so I do find that for long distance caregivers. The other thing is, I know we don't feel like it because many of us have full-time jobs, some of us have kids, some of us have pets to take care of, right? And we also are trying to help our parents, but we still do have more time to do this research and to do the work behind the scenes than our, parent, than the primary caregiver, right? So, and that's the space where then, Steph, you'll probably love this, is like where you can insert meditation, you can insert
Right.
mindfulness, right?
Yep.
It's not
Yep.
just the practical things that we're doing, but it's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
also it's such, you guys are going to be so mad at me when I say this, but I can say it because I'm out of the journey now, at least with my parent. Um, it really is such a time of growth.
Mm.
And it's like, and it's not a choice, right? Like you're forced to grow. But it can be you can be more present in the moment and be more compassionate and really try to soak in the time with your parent with dementia if you are also balancing out the practical stuff that you need to do, it's sort of like the to-do list, and how you're grieving, how you're getting through this process, because there are so many emotions involved in this. Like
Yeah.
I have to say, like, I require the clients that I work with, I require them to be seeing a therapist as well, because that's not my expertise. But but it's really helpful to have that complementary service while I'm also working with the client, because my
They go like
focus,
hand in hand.
yes,
They,
exactly.
they should.
Yes, my focus is solely on, what can I teach you about dementia? Here are the 3 different stages. Where do you think that your parent is? Let's talk about what to expect. What are the steps that we can take long term for your family to be set, you know? So then that's the whole goal, I think. And then along the practical stuff that we're doing, I'm also helping you feel that you're not alone, helping you feel that you can get through this because I got through this. This is the framework that I used, right? This is the
Yeah.
framework that my clients have used and have felt so much better and have had they really have found joy in their life because they're
Mhm.
able to do all these things so they don't feel the guilt. They don't feel um this stigma that we long distance caregivers do of like, oh, you don't love your parents enough to like, you didn't move back with them, so you can't be helpful, right? That is just not true. That's
I
not
think
true.
that's a good spot to expand on, right? Like the feelings and emotions that strong ones have to deal with, just the like a whole bunch of emotions, but then like that guilt, right? And that shame, and it's not usually coming from us inside, it's usually coming externally, like, oh,
Yes.
you wouldn't want to move back, like we didn't dedicate our whole childhood to being an adult, to the real adults, right? Like we didn't already sacrifice our childhood,
Absolutely. Yes.
we didn't already sacrifice this, and we didn't already jump ourselves into these adult situations. Like, haven't I given enough? And then you're gonna ask for me to give up everything. And I want to say this too:
Absolutely.
the
Yes.
people who usually ask those questions would never in their lives give up their lives to do anything for their parents. They would
Amen.
they would
Amen.
they
But
would
they will
never step up to
criticize
do
you
it.
to the end, right? They will.
Ah, but they
Yes.
would never do it. You're like, oh well, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do it. Are you gonna do that too? Oh well, I'm not prepared. I'm not as strong as you. I'm not as this, and you hear all the excuses, and so it's like to just park it right there and think about all the ways that guilt and shame are used as weapons against strong ones. When you dare
Yes.
want to maybe, possibly, potentially have your own life, when you maybe, you maybe just want to think about it, Laura. You're not even doing it. You're not even implementing it yet. You just possibly thinking about the mere notion of stepping out and doing your own thing offends people so much that usually that guilt and shame will yoke you right back into it unless
Yes.
you're able to break out of that. So
Yes.
I love that you brought that up. I just wanted to take a little pit stop there.
Oh my goodness, that is such a great point. Yes. And I think I mentioned to you too, like I have never really felt shame. And I
Right.
feel I feel very grateful for that. And I know that
Hmm.
that's a privilege that I have,
Yeah.
that I was born into. But also, when like right when I was a mom, like right when we found out that the baby was finally,
Yeah.
healthy and like
Yeah.
things were gonna be okay, thank God.
Yes.
Um, I just immediately felt this like train, like this I don't know, a train or like a large truck like hit me. And I was just like, just felt the shame and the despair of the entire world. It was so strange. Like and like that was probably where I felt the most shame, I think, in my life. And I know that that's all from the conditioning and that comes from like all, the 17 magazines that I like read when I was a
Yes.
teenager all the time, just kind of coming together and be like, these are all the expectations that you have to do. You know what I
Correct.
mean?
Correct. We were
Yeah.
conditioned.
Yes. Yes, we are. And it's insane, like how how hidden the conditioning
Ah,
is and how
ah,
insidious it is. Um and yeah, and so like it's so much to unpack. And so
so
like
much.
it's interesting because I mean, I think one of the I had a lot, like I luckily had a care team that like I created for myself when I was going
Yeah.
through the dementia journey, having been in the healthcare, field and knowing that I needed it for my own self-care. Um, but like a therapist was absolutely like required for dementia journey.
Required.
Required.
Yes.
Yeah. And even then, even when you have a therapist to go through all of those emotions, because something that I think people don't realize that I can kind of speak to since, from hindsight,
Mm-hmm.
is that especially on something like the dementia journey where it brings up everyone's fear because there is no cure, right? And
Right.
so and somehow it like makes us all like inner children that
Yep.
are not like regulated in any way, that are not grounded, that are just
Yep.
led by their emotions, right? Because
Yep.
it really is pure fear and it's anger, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
I had, it was really hard for me to do all the things, right? Like my mom asked me to like, can you have a conversation with dad about, giving up his car keys? And I was like, why
Mm.
is that my responsibility?
Like, why can't you
Um,
have the conversation? Why you are in the home with him? You
yes,
are married to him. Why wouldn't you be the one to have the conversation? And that's
yes,
always so interesting to me. The burden that is put on. You are the child, but you're parentified, and it's amazing to see, because it's like
yes,
your mom has the closest relationship to him, living with him in the house with him. Why wouldn't you ask him to give up his keys? It's safety for everyone in the house.
yes. So exactly. So like that is right, and that's exactly how I felt in that moment and throughout the dementia journey, but now that I look back at it and now that I'm in the
Mhm.
field and I've heard more stories, I'm taking more classes, I've heard more situations, the person with dementia sometimes is like does not have a good relationship with the primary caregiver
Right.
because they are the caregiver, right? And I see
That's
this like
that's true.
with as a parent, right? Like I see this as a parent. I see my son more than my husband sees, right? My husband's like the fun dad, right?
Yep,
Because he disciplines him, but my son sees me more, right? So it's kind of the same idea.
it's
And
true.
so, you know what? He probably he probably may not have listened to my mom. He may have had a bad reaction, you know. And honestly, it was a very sad and like heartbreaking conversation. And I felt angry that I had to be the one to do it. But
Yeah,
now I understand why. Now I
yeah,
understand why. And honestly, it was it was actually a moment of like really deep emotional intimacy that I had with my dad. Like he brought
yeah,
me up. I'm taking care of him emotionally for
yeah.
sure. I was the
Mm,
emotional caregiver,
mm-hmm.
at least like in the beginning before my mom could accept the diagnosis.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, exactly. So it's like I'm really glad you brought that up because it brings up like this dementia journey brings up so many emotions, right? So it's like the emotions about your role changing, right? It's the
Yep,
emotions about
yep.
I would get into, fights with my mom because like she wasn't where I was in the planning or the awareness stage of the dementia stage. And that is not rare. That is not rare. um,
Oh,
and also,
that's common.
yes, yes. And
Okay.
I would get angry with her and she would get angry with me. And what I realized was we were both angry at the dementia, but we can't,
Right,
like,
not at each
dementia
other.
is this vague cloud of something, right? And so that's another reason why families have such a hard time, on the dementia journey. And so having a therapist and then me to help you know you're not alone, to validate how you're feeling, to help you know that like, and I talk to, I notice too, like when I post on social media, there's kind of this idea of like, oh, but and I saw this in like support groups that I would go to for dementia when I was in the journey. And like, I would want to say what I was going through, the suffering that I was going through. And then one of the spouses would say something that would be like
Mm,
absolutely horrible. You know what I mean?
yep,
And I was like,
yep.
who am I? Right. Again, as a strong one,
Mm,
right? We're like, who am I to say what I'm experiencing? Right.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
that's why I specialize in working with long distance caregivers because what I
Mm,
explain to them that I've discovered myself is that everyone is suffering in this situation, right?
everyone.
No one is suffering more than the other person. It's a different type of suffering.
Yep.
And I am here for you because I know that type of suffering. I understand it, you know?
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, because especially with dementia, and even I'm thinking of ailments like cancer, or things like that. The blame game is so easy. It's so easy to jump
Yes.
on there, and honestly, you usually end up blaming the person that you think can handle it the most. And that's just the honesty of it
Yeah.
all, right? You usually end up blaming the one who you feel won't crumble or be crushed, or like, oh, fall under the weight, right? Which ends up being the strong one. But
Hmm.
dementia especially affects everyone. I mean, so the person who has it, right? Like, how does it feel to begin to forget things that you know you knew, but you don't know why you're forgetting, and you're losing all this stuff, and you're not understanding, and things are foggy and cloudy, and like you're saying with your dad, he taught you about math and you knew about numbers and things like that. To lose those skills, that's fearful. I mean, gosh, it's so daunting. It's like you don't know what's happening. And so I understand even what you said about he probably didn't listen to your mom. She might have tried to broach the subject with him and he was like, get out of my face. I'm paraphrasing. That's what I would have said. Get out of my face. Like, and I would have said it while driving off with my car keys, right? Like, get out of my face. Like, and sped off and choke.
Some
Like,
people with dementia have, yes.
I'm just saying, and like choke on my dust because I'm like, you're trying to take away my independence. And that's what it feels like. It feels like that robbery of independence. And then the people who have to be around the person with dementia, my gosh, how do how do you navigate that? Like all those emotions. So I love that you're saying that it's an equal playing field, that nobody is suffering more than the other, that everybody's experiences and everyone's going through it. And then in that same vein, everyone has a responsibility to carry a certain amount of weight on that. We can't just push all the weight on one person. We're not just talking about the primary caregiver or who you think is the strongest to hold it, that everybody has to carry that weight. So not one person gets crushed,
Yes. And I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of clients that I work with, like, they have siblings, but they are the ones, the client that I'm working with is the one that has to do it, right? For whatever reason. Like sometimes I talk with them and they say, well, it makes sense from, my sister's personality. She probably never would have been able to handle something like this.
We make excuses for people.
True. But so exactly. And that's why I think long distance caregivers may have a bad rap, right? Because we're like, oh, we don't care, we can't help, but we're not getting the resources that we need to get in order to help, right? And so like that's exactly why, I started out working with long distance daughters, because I was like, that was my experience. I don't want to, try to assume what someone else's experience is as a son, or like in the LGBTQ plus community, right? Because there's different things at play. But what I realized was like, yes, in the past, and even so, I mean, more women are the long distance caregivers for dementia in particular, but there's a growing group of sons. There's a growing group, and like, people that don't identify as a daughter or son, right? But they're still supporting from long distance. So it's like, you know what? I don't want to be part of the problem in the healthcare industry and just be like, well, I'm just going to serve daughters because they're the ones that help, right? I want to empower sons. I want to empower people that don't identify as daughters and sons, because we need all hands on deck, right?
All hands.
Like, so, that's basically what I help my clients with, is like, these are all the ways that you can help that are actually like substantial and aren't like, oh, send money to your parents, or like, run an errand for them when you live far away. And the other thing I break down too, which I think is, I haven't heard anyone else define it this way. You know what? Like, researchers got lost. There's only like one or two studies on, I think like one study on long distance caregiving specifically for dementia. And they all are trying to operationalize long distance.
Yeah.
And you know what? What I've found in my experience and the clients that I've worked with, long distance is not how many hours away you live. It's not if you live in a different state. It's not if you live in a different country. You could live down the block and you can still feel that emotional disconnection.
Sure.
So the way that I describe, the way that I define long distance caregivers is, you do not live with the person that is living with dementia. That's it.
Yeah,
because
I think that's great.
Yeah, because like, even if you live down the block, like, you still have some emotional distance, right?
Yes.
And the way that I found that out was having my dad over for a week, and I was like, whoa.
Oh.
This is just, I understand my mom now. I understand her, and I'm able to empathize with her more than I did in the past, because I can see, right? And this is just a week. It is not years. You know what I mean? Where many of them have years. And so, so that was a turning point for me as well.
Yeah. No, that's major. And I love how much discovery, was found on that journey, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like, you can empathize and you can understand where the primary caregiver is coming from now, because even living down the road, I love that you made that comparison. Like, that is long distance. You're not in the home, you're not there 24/7. You have the ability to get up and leave and go back
Yeah.
to your own home, so that is a difference. And then the role of empathy in all of this, right? Where you are able to say, okay, I now understand, which even helps you and your mom out, or just in general, even helps you and the primary caregiver share that load. Like, I'm understanding where you're coming from now. Like, you can't, it's almost like you can't escape. And I want to mention too, Laura, because you said it a couple times about the team, even with fertility, going through that process, like, it sounds like the caregiver has to have a caregiver team, like the caregiver
Yes.
themselves has to have a
Yes.
care team, and it goes for everybody. A therapist needs to have a therapist. I believe a pastor needs to have a pastor, like all of that. Life coach has to have a life coach. In that same vein, like, you are the caregiver and you're giving so much care out, but the team around you has to be the one pouring back into you. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
it's like, and sometimes that team, isn't going to be even directly related to the individual with dementia or the individual who has something going on. It just means that you need to have someone around you, people around you, or preferably a team,
Yeah.
who can give you what you need, because caregivers pour out so much and receive so little. And it's not about financial compensation. There's so much emotional drain on that. There's so
Yes.
much mental drain that even if you were paid well, it really wouldn't matter,
Yep.
because what you have to give out from your emotions and from your mental state far outweighs anything. So that team really helps to pour back in. I did want to mention that because you had said it a couple times, and I thought that was key.
Absolutely, and I'm in therapy still. Like I've been
Yes.
in therapy since high school, and and I think that's also what has helped me hold everything,
Yeah.
and have the coping, and I started doing mindfulness meditation like maybe like a couple procedures into my fertility journey, and it has been like incredibly life-changing. It really helped with my empathizing with my mom, with my dad, grounding myself before I had a
Mm,
conversation with them was so important, right? Because
yeah.
everyone else is going to be dysregulated. So you need to try to be emotionally regulated when you go into
That's
that
so true.
conversation. It's
Yeah.
so much easier when you are regulated. So,
Yeah, it
yeah.
is. And I think that's a good segue into some of the other ways that you practice self-care, right? Because
Yeah.
you don't just do this as a profession, but you live this. This is your lived experience, right?
Yes.
You didn't read about this in a book. You lived
Yes.
this experience and you took that experience and you allowed it to help other people. So what are some other ways that, outside of mindfulness and as a mindfulness life coach, I'm like, yes, absolutely, do all of that, meditation, visualization, deep breathing, all of that. It's perfect.
Yep.
What are some other ways that you yourself have practice self-care, and then what do you suggest to clients to do in this process, because a lot of self-care is needed?
Oh, for sure. So I go swimming.
Yes.
I and there's something about so like I used to run, but I have some like chronic pain now from delivering my
Mm,
baby. And so the
yeah.
swimming is really helpful because it doesn't put pressure on any of my joints. There's
Mm-hmm.
something very um calming about like to my brain and my ears of like being in the water and not hearing yelling
Mm-hmm.
voices,
Mm-hmm.
especially having a toddler
It's all there.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and feeling overstimulated. And I think like that could happen with caregivers as well sometimes, right? And so yeah, so swimming, and I had done swimming in the past. I also what was the other thing? Yoga, which again, I'm finally getting back into. I'm in like
Okay.
sort of the yoga if you have an injury class right now. So that's very
Oh,
exciting. So I'm like, I
yeah.
cannot do all the sun salutations right now. Like that would be very painful. But it's so nice to get back into that. Um and let's see what else. I definitely find that I need like some kind of artistic outlet.
Mm,
So like, kind of I try to have a few different options around.
yeah.
Um, so I can kind of see like what do I feel like today,
Yep.
but coloring, a lot of colors just makes me very happy. So I love like going to the store and picking out, really nice like different color crayons that make me
Yeah.
happy and like coloring books that make me happy. Like it's really interesting that I'm realizing this now too, having a child is like, oh, like we had really good, mental health habits when we were kids. you know, like being
Yeah.
outside for a couple of hours in the sun, like going through the
Yep.
sprinkler, and it's like, what
Yep.
happened? Right. And
What
so,
happened? And why did we
yeah,
stop doing this? Coloring, drawing on the sidewalk with chalk, jump
yes,
roping, running around. Like, we shouldn't be forgetting those things in our
no,
adulthood.
no, we don't have to be boring. You know what I
We
mean?
don't,
And,
we don't
and,
have to be
yeah,
boring.
yeah, and that's the thing, it's like and it's not I think the thing about creating art, we feel like it's like this superfluous thing, like, oh, who again, like who are we strong ones to create art? Like that's not doing anything that's
Yeah.
productive, right?
No. Mm-mm.
Um, but
No.
what I realized, like there's like a watercolor that I did when, it was like after one of my miscarriages and it was like, oh, we had tried IVF and we have to do it again. And then there was a point
Yeah.
of like moving forward on that. And I was just like, I had so many different emotions pent up in
Mm,
me that I just like painted something with a bunch of colors, and it felt
mm.
so much better when I had gotten that out. And now
Yep.
when I look back at it, it's like, wow, like that really did represent how I was feeling. And I'm not one like to write in a journal because I just feel like I'm back in like middle school talking about the guy that I have a crush on,
Yeah.
like it just doesn't
I
it just
really
doesn't
love Johnny.
yeah, like it doesn't resonate with me as much, right? And so like I actually have found myself doing it for like certain like mindfulness trainings, exercises, things like I'm
Sure.
like, oh, okay, I'll
Sure.
write notes, but like to me, notes are different than like this is how my day was, you know what I mean?
Correct.
Um,
Correct.
and so, but I think like everyone has different preferences, but it's just I think recognizing that expressing ourselves is so important and it reminds
Mhm.
us of our humanity and not that we're robots doing things, you know?
Yeah, that's a great point because strong ones we're seen as robots or superhuman, and we're looked at as not supposed to be having any emotions, any feelings. Why are you upset? Why are you crying? Why are you breaking down? Why are you angry? Why are you depressed or anxious or any of that? We're seen as just someone to receive everyone's problems, burdens, emotions, and we
Yes.
ourselves are not seen as humans. So that's a great point. Like, it's always important to remind us of our humanity, that we are human, that we do hurt, we do feel the same pain as everyone else. And just because we can tolerate more pain doesn't mean that we have to tolerate more pain, or just because we can tolerate more burden doesn't mean that we have to. That we have to,
Yes.
and we often, Laura, have to remind people of our humanity. That's a boundary. It's a humanity boundary that we have to set. That we have to now remind you that if you're experiencing this emotion, I too am going to experience it as well. So it's like you can't say, oh, your emotions don't matter because
Yep.
you're a strong one. And often that's the case. Often our emotions are just discarded, put aside. You can deal with that later. Oh, you're strong. Oh, you're strong. You're strong. You can handle it. You can do it. And it's like, we didn't ask to be strong. I was
Yep.
saying this on another episode. We were starting to talk about that. Like, when people start to call me strong, I'm like, ow, it's physically like, oh no, stop, like, it hurts
Yes.
now because it's like, this isn't something that we were like, I think I want to wake up and I just want to be a strong one. This is the direction that I want my life to go. No,
Right.
it's usually
Right.
birthed out of much trauma, much pain, much hurt, much much responsibility given to us. So I love that. We have to remind ourselves too of our humanity
Yes.
and others. We have to put that boundary up like firmly.
Another thing I love about having those outlets, whether it's
Mm,
swimming, whatever, like
mm,
you that's something you have control over, right? I mean,
Yes.
dementia, you just
Oh,
like have no control over. I
no
mean,
control.
like, there's going to be a progression, but you don't know when the progression is going to happen. You don't know what your parent is going to stop doing, right? Like my dad
Correct.
was not able to speak like early on into the diagnosis, which was really painful because I don't think I have anything that has his voice on it,
Oh,
that I can, remember. But like so much is unpredictable and it really does feel like a roller coaster.
yeah.
So then the things that when you have that time to yourself, because you do as a long distance caregiver, because you need to make it, you need to make that
You have to
time for
carve it
yourself.
out. Hmm.
Yes, yes. You have control, right? Like I have
Mm,
control over like, do I want to use the pink crayon for this? I know hippos are normally blue, but I want to make this one purple, just because I feel like it,
yeah.
right?
You
Like,
feel like
and
it.
it's just like that's, it's not only reminding ourselves of the humanity, but also giving ourselves that freedom where we actually have freedom, right?
Yep.
And when I'm swimming, I'm like, what stroke do I want? Like, and it sounds so simple, but it's like that gives us our agency back, right?
Yep.
In our own lives, which is so important. And it's not just like agency to like do our jobs really well. It's agency to make ourselves happy, to
Yeah.
remember what brings us joy. Because that's the thing that I teach my clients is like, we learn in this society that dementia is the end. We learn that dementia is depressing
That's
and
it.
that's all
Yep.
there is. But there is joy along with that grief. There is
Yes.
joy. And if you can
Woo.
start to recognize that in, the transformation of your relationship with your loved one with dementia, and they feel joy too, right? They can feel
Yes.
joy
Yes.
too. So
Hmm.
it's really trying to reframe this idea of, and dementia will like steal your dreams and, because you are the long distance caregiver, no, you
Yep.
can still have your dreams, you
Yep.
know?
Yeah. I love that. I love the reframing and the reshaping, especially as a therapist. One of my favorite modalities is narrative therapy because it
Mm,
allows you to take one version of the story that might be larger, right? The dominant story, and then you reduce it and you bring up another dominant story. You shape your own narrative, you shape your own life. And I love that. Even about, right, swimming, what do you want to do? How do you want to color? Watercolor, whatever you want to do, you're able to do it.
yeah.
And it gives you that freedom. It gives you that freedom to change your story, to
Yes.
change your narrative and to make sure that even as daunting and as sad as dementia can be, right? And in the grander scope of just being a caregiver, right? As daunting as whatever the ailment is, or as daunting as whatever has someone disabled or whatever, differently
Yeah.
abled, all that you are still able to find joy in that your life is not over, that your life
Yes.
is not finished, that the person, who has a diagnosis, their life is not over. And you don't have to suffer through this. It's not something that you just begrudgingly are just walking through like with a ball and chain. But I love that you're pointing out the importance that we need to find the joy in that, and that there is joy to find in that. There
Yes.
is sunlight there, and having the right resources really makes it easier to find that joy. It can be super depressing when you don't know where to go to. All your siblings have put the responsibility on you. Your other parent has put the responsibility on you. All your family members are requiring you to be at every hospital visit, do all these things, and you have no outlet. There's no joy there. But this whole time we've been speaking, you've been discussing how to find that, how to
Hmm.
make sure that we have to be responsible for our own joy. We can't depend on that
Hmm.
from anyone else.
Yes. And to answer your question from before, it really just depends on what my client, it's essentially like what they enjoyed doing when they were younger, the
Yeah,
different hobbies that they enjoyed doing when they were younger.
yeah,
And the kind of bringing that, how do we translate that to adult life that because some people are like, oh, I'm not a child anymore. You know what I mean? So everyone has
right.
different preferences, but whatever brings you joy, whatever helps you have that outlet, that's what I talk through with my clients and we try to make a plan.
Yeah, and it's so important. And I mean, I think when you are an adult as a child, you're put into these adult situations, you you forget, you forget how to be a child. You forget the things. There are certain things that are missed in that. And so when you're an adult, you almost have to relive your childhood. You almost have to relearn and reshape yourself in that way. So coloring and doing all that, I think is such a beautiful way to reintroduce yourself to your childhood, and like we were saying, these are things that we should have never stopped doing. I even am voting to incorporate naps into our work life. Like, I don't, why did we take out naps and snacks? Who told us to do
Absolutely.
that? Like, who made that arrangement? We should always have naps, like at our job, on our jobs, whether we're
Absolutely. Yes.
entrepreneurs or we work in corporate, wherever. Like, wait, why did we stop napping? Why did we stop getting snacks? So, that would so many places of employment, so many places of business would be so more functional if they had naps. People are cranky, so it's just
Yes.
like, but in all seriousness, you bring people back to that childlike wonder and awe that
Yes.
we're told to forget and we have to hold on to. As grown as I am, I turned 37 at the end of August. I'm not calling myself a kid, but there's still so much childness in me that I don't want to ever let go, because you forget how to live life.
Yes.
You forget how to appreciate things. You forget to be in awe, and oh wow, you forget to look at things from a child's lens. So encouraging people to do that and to bring themselves back there. And I want to say this too, because even as rough as some childhoods are, there are bright spots, right? Where you have a favorite book, you have a favorite stuffed animal, and bringing people back to those spaces really begins to heal that child in you and encourages that child to say, okay, let's take a step forward and keep moving on.
Yes. Yes. Because I know from many years of therapy, and I even have a business coach right now, and we're going through this right now with my business.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
like you still have that child in you that has the coping mechanisms that they had to survive, but that's
Yep.
not the adult, right? And so you
Mm.
kind of have to translate that to, okay,
Ah,
okay, nervous system, I'm an adult
correct.
now. This is how
Correct.
I'm going to handle it, right? It does not go away, right? It doesn't go away. And I will
Never.
say, and kind of, I guess, an easy, if you do have a child, an easy way to channel that is just, coloring with them, playing Legos with them, right?
Correct.
Like that's, and not kind of pushing that away, be like, oh, that's child. I know some people do that, right? It's like, oh, that's
Yep.
childlike, that's not me.
Yep.
Well, if you do
Yep.
that, then societal conditioning has won, right?
They
Because
won.
yeah, I mean, because you are the robot that is, in late stage capitalism society
Yep.
right now,
Yep.
providing
Yep.
providing the things, giving the investors all the money that they want, right?
Correct.
And you are
Correct.
losing yourself. You are losing
Correct.
yourself. And so that joy, and honestly, again, like there's such a misconception about people that are living with dementia, because
Mm.
in some ways, especially when my dad got through the fact where like half of his brain was like, having the dementia symptoms, and half of his brain was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, like very
Yeah.
aware of what was happening. Like I think that was the most heartbreaking part. Like for my dad, that was around mid stage. But
Mm.
after that, it's like they have that childlike wonder and joy, because they
Yep.
don't have the like machine, like hamster wheel running in their head of like, oh God,
Correct.
I only have 5 minutes to do this, I have to do this, I have to
Mhm.
do this,
Mhm.
right? They have all the time in the world, which is actually like, I saw a lot of joy in my dad that
Yeah.
I have not seen before, you know? And so there are these glimpses of your loved one that you don't, when you're my case, your parent gets diagnosed with dementia, like no one talks about that stuff, right? But there are moments of that, and knowing that there can be moments of that are what
Mm.
get you through, in addition to the moments that you're creating for yourself and in your life, right? Because you're not putting your
Yeah.
dreams on hold. So
No, it's so true. And to mention that people with dementia, they do, you begin to revert to your childhood. I mean, that it's coupled with getting older too, right? I notice
Yes.
that a lot of elderly people, are seasoned people, they begin to be childlike again. Temper tantrums, you have to end up raising your parents, like a child.
Yeah.
Temper tantrums, just impulsive. Children don't know about a filter, so they'll say whatever. So you notice them reverting back to that childhood, but then with the added layer of dementia, I'm like, it probably accelerates, but
Yeah.
that's not all bad. I appreciate you reframing so much that that's not all bad, that there is no pressure to be an adult in that moment, that there is no pressure from society, that there is no pressure to outperform or overperform or overachieve. You're just being yourself. I long to be that. I long to go back to that baseline where I'm not saying I want to, neglect my responsibilities, but in my mind, I would like to, man, cast off all the things that society tries to put on us. You mentioned capitalism and all that, consumerism, and to
Mm,
cast that off and to say, no, I just want to sit like a child and be in childlike wonder and not even have to worry about all the things. So that's a blessing, that's a blessing in the midst of all that chaos, as rough as dementia can be, that your father was able to revert back to that. And there's joy in that. You're joyful as a child in that area. There's so little that you have to worry about, that I'm like,
yes.
oh man, that's beautiful. Like, ooh, I'm not saying I'm wishing for dementia, but for that aspect of it,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely,
That
absolutely.
right. And so there's a freedom in that
Freedom.
that we haven't
Free-
had since we were children, right?
Yeah,
Um, and that is it's, again, trying to find the light in this, like that
yeah,
is could be a gift, right? And
it
so
is.
I want to point out too, just showing how strong conditioning is. It's like people they've done studies on this. It's like people who are living with dementia actually experience more upset, more depression because of
Mm,
the stigma and how other people treat them
mm,
versus the actual dementia.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
because they feel that they've lost their purpose. Because what we've learned in this society is that our purpose is our job. So once they
correct.
retire, it's like, they're like, well, what am I doing here? Right.
Who am I?
So that's why they say, in my work as a certified senior advisor, we learned that, that's why it's so important. It's the most important for elders to find their purpose. If it's, if it was just their job, like find another purpose, right? Because that's going to help you and your neural pathways like stay online essentially. So like if someone is really proud about being a grandmother, if they like to travel a lot, right? Like
Yep,
you
yep,
really focus on that because you
yeah,
do, purpose is so important to everyone, right? um and especially because of the stigma, and all like the bad feelings and the fact that friends disappear.
mm,
It's actually called like the law of disappearing friends, for people that live with dementia, right? It's just like that is what's causing the negative effects and the higher percentage of people having depression once they get a diagnosis, right? It's not actually the dementia. So it like when I read that, it just blew my mind. It blew my mind.
my my mind
Um,
is blown in that. My mind is blown in that way because the external factors have a bigger impact than the actual disease, which is sad, right? Which
yeah,
is sad in a way because even friends disappearing and things like that. Like, I think people decide what they can and can't tolerate, not realizing or realizing and not caring, because there are people who are very aware and they're so aware that they're like, whatever, I just don't want to be bothered. Not realizing that in those moments, the people with dementia or any type of ailment need a circle. They need that familiarity, where you don't have to learn new people all over again. So it's like now you're gonna take your steps back, your distance. You're hurting the situation rather than helping, and really just looking at, like, oh man, oh, am I going to have to be burdened, or are they going to depend on me so much? And it's like, ugh, that's something that our society encourages us to do. It encourages us to be very selfish,
Yes.
very me, and how is this going to affect me? And not that we're supposed to lay ourselves down for everybody, right? Like, there are boundaries we have to put in place, but my goodness, someone's going through a huge life change, and then we're going to decide to add fuel to the fire and say, I'm going to remove myself, or I'm going to not be understanding, right? I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
make you feel worse, or I'm going to be frustrated with you or snappy with you, or if you don't remember who I am and things like that. Like, I don't understand that thought pattern of people. Like, where's your mind in that? Like, someone's already going through this, their family's going through this, and now you're going to add extra weight. So I believe that study, but it also blows my mind that it's not the dementia that really causes the issues. It's all the external things that happen around the person, and it shouldn't be so. It
No,
really should.
no, no. And I will, just from our own situation, I
Yeah,
think I can speak a little bit to your question,
yeah,
about how, like, how you don't understand where that comes from.
yeah,
So for my dad had such a good friend, that he met from work, that I called him uncle as a kid.
yeah.
And I actually reached out, knowing, having being in the field and taking the classes and everything, I knew that he still needed those connections to his friends. And
Mm.
I reached out to him, and I reached out to, my dad's other friends too. Um, and this particular friend, I don't think he ever responded.
Mm.
Um, and so I was angry, and I was just like, what kind of friend, you know what I mean? I didn't say anything to
Yeah,
him, but in my head,
yeah.
right? I didn't have anyone to complain to but myself. But
Right. It was just
yeah.
you.
But I found out later, this was after my dad died. It was after my dad died, and I created, again, like we talked about creating art,
Yeah.
a music playlist. I created a
Mm.
Christmas music playlist that I actually sent out to all of his friends, and I said,
Wow.
this was like my grieving process with my dad.
Mm.
And he wrote back, and this friend who I hadn't heard from, and he said, like, I really appreciate this playlist, and I want you to know that my mom died from dementia.
Oh, so it was a tough. Oh,
Because
mm.
it's that fear. It's that
It
fear because there
triggers.
is no cure. It's the fear that's reinforced by everything on media, everything that
Mm-hmm,
we're fed, essentially.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and it brings up all of our fears, right? We all
Mm.
become children. We all,
Yeah.
right? We just all get dysregulated. It's like the worst
Mm.
possible version of ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
Because of that fear. It's solely because of that fear. And so when I read that, I was like, now I have an understanding, right? That's where the empathy comes in, right? And
Yeah.
that wasn't the ideal situation, but I
Mm-mm.
understand where he was coming from. I'm sure he was he was probably a long distance son, right? And his long distance caregiver for his mom. And some people are
Yeah.
just like, I don't want to do it again. I know there's people that I talk to, they're like, so you went through this, and now you're in a career teaching people, what I mean? Like, and working
Right.
with
It's
other
hard to
clients who are
understand.
going through this. Yeah.
And and I'm sorry, I was gonna say that, and that's the beauty of wielding the strength. Like, most people couldn't handle that. And because you
Yeah.
had to be a strong one from childhood, that strength now can be the hammer that shit, or that knocks things down and really allows you to carve a path,
Yes.
into helping other people out. And that type of strength should be acknowledged. Like, that level of strength should be brought to the light. Like, you have the strength to not only have gone through the situation, but also you're steeped in it. Like, it's your profession, it's what you do. You're steeped in it, which could be triggering, to some people, which I'm sure people are like, how are you able to do that?
Yeah.
That's where we acknowledge the strength. Like, that's the perfect place to say it is only because you are a strong one that you're able to do that.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's so
Yeah,
funny because I'm like, am I the, am I the, because we even asked that. We're like, I know we're the strong one, but am I strong? Do I feel strong? It's
yeah,
just like,
that's
you're right.
there's
It's
proof.
like, no, I don't feel like I had a choice, but I did it, I guess, and like, yes, I
Yeah,
grew from it. And yes, and more, it's more like my determination
yeah.
to create the guidance. Essentially what I needed was me
Mm,
more than 10 years ago, right? Was
I
a
love
guide to
that.
be like, hey, these are the different stages. This is what you can expect. Here's where your parent is. Here's what you can do behind the scenes. And like, and if the person doesn't want help, then you just, and this is what I tell my clients or people that ask me. It's like, you do the work. You do the work behind the scenes. You have
Yep.
things set up because if they're still not listening to you as the kid, right? Even though you don't feel like a kid at all,
Right.
um, they're going to need a plan when they're in a crisis, and you are going to have the plan. You are going to have
It's
it all
true.
figured out, right? So that I had to sort of
It's
do that with
true.
my mom too,
Hmm.
and my dad. So yeah, I mean, it's done. Like, you know what I mean? So it's not, I think, it's not in vain. You're not doing that work in vain. And I think that's also kind of goes to like my creating my own path, but then teaching
Hmm.
people
Hmm.
this path because like there's nothing else out there. It just blows, like, just I can't even believe it, right?
Yeah.
There's other guides, therapists that specialize in working even with caregivers for dementia, but as you and I discussed, it's a different type of suffering, and
It's different.
we need to be heard too. We need to be at the table too,
Hmm.
you know?
For sure. For sure.
So,
And I'm always thinking like what you went through, what you suffered through now really isn't in vain because all you've taken all of that and you wrapped it up and you packaged it so that people can learn and live from your experience so they don't have to go through that. And that's it's like, oh, everything I experienced as a childhood, in my childhood, everything I went through, my journey is not in vain, and it is helping other people, and it's impacting many. You don't hear a lot of conversations about caregiving for dementia. I think we hear a lot about dementia, like
mhm.
I think we hear a lot about dementia, but we don't necessarily hear a lot about people caregiving in dementia. And we definitely don't hear about long distance caregiving in that way. So I love that you carved out that niche for yourself. You know what I mean? Like that's your lane. And I
Yes.
and as more dementia cases rise, and I think there has been an uptick and an increase, just from what we're seeing,
Yep.
more people are going to need this resource for sure. And I think this is a really good place for you to let people know where they can find you, and then we'll do final thoughts, and how however you want to do that. But let people know where they can find you, your resources, because I'm sure that those going through this are sitting in silence and suffering. And
Yeah.
so if they know that there's an avenue, a way, a tool that they can use, that'll be so beneficial.
Yeah. And I will also say, like, you know, I I am very much like my heart on my sleeve, and I am
Yeah,
like say all the emotional, words and everything. But if you
yeah,
don't,
yeah,
if to our listeners, like if you don't feel like you're suffering, but you are super stressed out,
yeah.
and you feel like you don't have time to do this, and you're trying to like you're kind of putting on the back burner, but you're feeling that guilt, you're feeling that helplessness. That's also who I guide.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a professional dementia guide. You can find me at joyindementia.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, we can put that like a little
Yes,
ticker or
it'll
something.
be right in the
Perfect.
description.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
So
The link will be
I
right
don't need to
there.
spell it right now and take up time, but
No.
uh but yeah, definitely book a call with me and we can see if it would be a good fit. You can tell me your situation, and it's a complimentary call. So I'd love to chat with you and see how we can work together.
That's awesome. Such a great resource and a great offering, because navigating that space is so scary. It's so scary, and you don't know the way to go. And there's so much frustration and resentment, shame, anger, guilt, fear. Everything is coming down at once. You need someone to help, you through that. And again, not just someone who's read about, oh, what is it? Maybe what does it sound like for other people to have dementia? Who's other people's parents. You've lived this.
Yeah.
You know firsthand how to guide people through that. So so grateful for your presence here. So grateful for what you're able to share. And just the grander scheme of being a strong one, but then in a more focused way of what it looks like to navigate that with a parent with dementia and then another parent who wasn't ready to accept the diagnosis. So automatically by default, it falls on you.
Yeah.
As you know, it's just where else is it going? It has to
Right.
land on you. So I love that you're able to just take us through that. So transparent and just sharing your journey. And so grateful that you were able to come out with tools to help others. Like, I think that's the beautiful thing about it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here, and you saying that as a therapist too, because I think like I think people ask me like, "Well, are you a therapist? Are you a coach?" I'm like, not
Mhm.
really. I'm a guide.
Yeah,
I'm a guide, you know? So yes, that's
yeah.
yeah.
You're a
Thank you so
guide.
much for having
Okay.
me.
Absolutely. Listen, we have a great guide as a guest. Please take her up on her complimentary one-on-one so that you can get assistance and help. This has been wonderful and just super helpful and healing. Like this, it always happens that way. You're able to share and heal and know that strong ones, look, we're not alone. Okay. We're
Yeah,
not alone and we can make it out. There is hope and there is joy, right? There's joy in dementia, there's joy in life, there's just joy on the other side of that mountain because it's tough being a strong one, but there's joy there. And Laura, thank you so much for pointing out the joy and spotlighting the joy and allowing us to see that, listen, our strong journeys are not in vain. And we should take what we went through and help others with it so that we didn't go through this for nothing.
absolutely. Thank you, Steph, and thank you all for listening.
Yes, yes. So we will see you on the next episode. Blessings, everyone.